Dr. Jackson Miller had always imagined first contact would be more dignified. Not him scrambling through the halls of the Titan research station in his coffee-stained lab coat, clutching a tablet containing humanity's potential extinction notice. The incident began 43 minutes ago. Their deep space sensors had detected an anomaly, crystalline structures propagating through the Kuiper belt at impossible speeds. Within minutes, the unknown entities had shredded 3 of their most advanced probe satellites, as if they were tissue paper. "Computer, replay the footage again," Miller commanded, skidding to a halt in the station's main observatory. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the last transmission from probe KX 249. The image quality was exceptional, which made it all the more terrifying. The creature, if you could call it that, resembled a living diamond with impossible angles that seemed to bend space around it. Its crystalline body pulsed with internal light, and what appeared to be weapons sprouted and retracted from its surface at will. The probe lasted exactly 2.3 seconds after visual contact. Dr. Miller, his assistant, Tommy Chen, burst into the observatory. "Sir, you need to see this. The Galileo Defense Station just went dark." Miller's blood ran cold. The Galileo Station was humanity's most advanced military installation in the solar system, housing enough firepower to repel a small fleet. "Show me." The feed from their long-range telescopes told a story that would haunt Miller's dreams. Hundreds of crystalline beings swarmed the station like geometric piranha, their bodies refracting the light of distant stars. A barrage of plasma fire from the station's defenses struck one of the creatures directly. Instead of destroying it, the energy was absorbed, causing the being to grow larger. "They're feeding off our weapons," Tommy whispered in horror. The station's destruction took less than 3 minutes, but it was what happened next that made Miller's scientific mind race with terrible possibilities. The creatures began to reproduce, using the station's debris as raw material. Where there had been hundreds, now there were thousands. "Get me a direct line to Earth Defense Command," Miller ordered, his fingers flying over the console. "And Tommy, get everyone to the emergency shelters. Now." The young assistant hesitated. "Sir, protocol states." Protocol just went out the window along with humanity's most advanced defense station. "Move." As emergency sirens began to wail through the station, Miller finally connected with Earth Defense Command. The face that appeared on his screen belonged to General Sarah Hayes, her expression suggesting she was already having the worst day of her career. "Dr. Miller, unless this is..." "General, we have confirmation. The Galileo station wasn't destroyed by a malfunction. We're dealing with a Class A extinction-level threat. These beings, we're calling them Nexari based on their crystalline structure. They're unlike anything we've ever theorized about. They don't just destroy, they consume and replicate. And they're headed straight for Earth." The general's face hardened. "How long?" Miller glanced at his calculations. "At their current velocity, 72 hours until first contact." But that's not the worst part. He transmitted the sensor data. "They're learning, adapting with each engagement. The beings that destroyed Galileo are already twice as efficient as the ones that took out our probes. We're not just facing an invasion. We're facing an enemy that evolves faster than we can develop countermeasures." Through the observatory's massive windows, Miller could see more crystalline shapes appearing against the backdrop of Saturn's rings. Their geometric patterns were beautiful in a terrifying way, like frozen fractals of death. "General," Miller's voice dropped to a near whisper, "I've studied every known form of life in our solar system. These beings, they're perfect, too perfect. They have no vulnerabilities that we can detect, no biological weaknesses to exploit. They're the apex predators of the galaxy, and we just became their next target." The general was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who understood they were about to make history, or become it. "Perfect, you say? Well, Doctor, in my experience, anything that calls itself perfect has never had to deal with the chaos that is humanity. Begin evacuation procedures." And Doctor, send everything you have. We're going to show these crystal bastards why humans are still around despite being the most imperfect species in our own damn solar system. As Miller ended the transmission, a small smile crept across his face. Maybe that was it. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its imperfections. After all, what use was perfection against a species that had turned surviving despite itself into an art form? The Nexary's first official contact with Earth happened outside a hot dog stand in Manhattan. Barry O'Connor, proud owner of Barry's Best Dogs, for 23 years, had just finished serving a customer when the sky turned to crystal. They descended like shards of living diamond, their crystalline forms refracting the morning sunlight into deadly prismatic displays. The lead being, nearly 15 feet tall, landed directly in front of Barry's cart, probably expecting the usual terror and submission they'd encountered across 74% of known space. Instead, Barry took one look at the towering crystal monster and muttered, "Buddy, you're blocking my best-selling spot." The Nexary commander, designated Supreme Vanquisher of Worlds, had never encountered such a response in its centuries of conquest. It extended its crystalline form to its full height, weapons sprouting from every facet of its body, and spoke in a voice that had shattered the morale of entire civilizations. "Kneel before your Eniyui masters, primitive beings." Barry scratched his beard. "Yan, no, but you want a hot dog. Got a special on the jumbo size." Across the street, Dr. Jackson Miller watched the scene unfold through his binoculars, barely believing what he was seeing. He'd rushed to New York after detecting the Nexary's approach, hoping to witness their first contact protocol. What he hadn't expected was a hot dog vendor treating the galaxy's deadliest species like an annoying customer. The Nexary commander raised its crystalline arm, preparing to vaporize this impudent human and his primitive food cart. That's when Barry's cart exploded. Not with the usual fire and shrapnel of a normal explosion. No, Barry's cart, which he'd apparently rigged with every condiment container pressurized to near bursting, created a blast radius of superheated ketchup, mustard, and relish that coated the crystalline beings in a sticky, boiling mess. "My special sauce, UCRYSTALJ aircase," Barry shouted, already running. "And you who better be live, it's extra spicy." Miller's scientific mind kicked into overdrive as he observed the Nexary's reaction. The supposedly invincible beings were stumbling, their crystalline forms actually smoking where the hot sauce had made contact. Their perfect geometric patterns were disrupted by condiments. Before the Nexary could recover, more chaos erupted. A street performer's boombox started blasting New York, New York, at a frequency that made the crystal beings vibrate uncomfortably. A tour bus full of elderly tourists, instead of fleeing, began taking photos with their flashes on full brightness, the strobing light causing visible distress to the Nexary's light-sensitive structures. Miller's phone buzzed. It was General Hayes. "Doctor, are you seeing this?" "General, it's incredible. The Nexary's perfect crystalline structure, it's actually their weakness. They're so ordered, so precise, that they don't know how to handle chaos. And humans," he laughed as he watched a hot dog cart vendor lead the galaxy's deadliest species on a chase through Times Square. "We're basically chaos incarnate." Similar reports were flooding in from around the world. In Tokyo, a group of Harajuku performers had surrounded a Nexary war party, their wild dancing and J-pop music creating such a disorienting scene that the crystal beings actually retreated. In London, an impromptu cricket match had broken out around a Nexary landing site, with locals completely ignoring the deadly aliens while arguing about proper batting form. The Nexary commander, still dripping with hot sauce, attempted to regain control of the situation. "Your primitive weapons, KNOT arm in US. We are PERFAC. A street sweeper truck chose that moment to round the corner, its rotating brushes catching several smaller Nexeri in its path. The crystalline beings, designed to withstand the vacuum of space and energy weapons, found themselves being scrubbed like dirty windows. "General," Miller said, watching the Nexeri commander trying to process why its threats weren't working, "I think we just discovered something incredible. The Nexeri have never failed because they've never faced an enemy that doesn't play by the rules. But humans, we don't even know what the rules are." Through his binoculars, Miller watched Barry return with 2 more hot dog carts and a determined grin. "And something tells me we're about to teach the galaxy's perfect predators a lesson in imperfection." The Nexeri's supreme command vessel hung in high orbit, its crystalline surface reflecting Earth's continents like a massive diamond mirror. Inside, First Apex Commander Xetal was experiencing an entirely new sensation, a headache. "Replay the human transmission," it ordered, its perfect crystalline form crackling with frustration. The holographic display flickered to life, showing what should have been Earth's surrender ceremony. Instead, the feed showed something called a cat video compilation, set to what humans designated as epic saxophone music. The surrenders the Nexeri had demanded were being turned into something called memes. "Impossible," Keitel muttered, watching a video of one of their fearsome warriors slipping on a strategically placed banana peel get remixed into something humans called a TikTok challenge. Dr. Jackson Miller stood in the Pentagon's war room, trying not to smile as he explained to General Hayes and the Joint Chiefs what they were witnessing. The Nexeri's neural networks are crystalline in structure, perfect, ordered, and completely unable to process absurdity. And humanity, we're pumping out weapons-grade absurdity at an industrial scale. "You're telling me we're fighting an advanced alien species with cat videos?" General Hayes asked, raising an eyebrow. "No, ma'am," Miller grinned. "We're fighting them with something far more powerful, their own inability to understand why cat videos make us laugh." Across the room, Staff Sergeant Emily "Mad Dog" Martinez snorted. Her Marine Corps squad had just returned from what was possibly the strangest combat mission in human history. They'd deployed against a Nexeri ground force in Seattle armed with paintball guns, bubble machines, and a sound system blasting Baby Shark on repeat. The big crystal bastards just froze, Martins reported, still covered in neon paint. Their combat algorithms couldn't process why trained warriors would attack with colors and bubbles. When we started doing the chicken dance while firing, 3 of them actually crashed and had to reboot. Miller's eyes lit up. That's it. Their perfect memory and processing. It's becoming their weakness. They're trying to find military logic in actions that deliberately have none. The war room's main screen showed live feeds from around the world. In Berlin, a flash mob had surrounded a Nexeri patrol, performing an increasingly complex synchronized dance routine. The crystalline warriors, programmed to predict and counter enemy movements, were glitching as they tried to identify the tactical purpose of the Macarena. In Mumbai, street festival performers had turned a Nexeri assault into an impromptu Bollywood number. The aliens' attempts to maintain their fearsome image were severely undermined by the fact that they kept getting tangled in colorful festival ribbons. "Look at their formations," Martins pointed out. "They're starting to hesitate. These things have never faced an enemy they couldn't intimidate. Now they're becoming the galaxy's biggest joke." As if to prove her point, the main screen switched to a viral video of a Nexeri warrior attempting to deliver a terrifying ultimatum, only to be interrupted by someone's grandmother hitting it with a slipper and scolding it in Italian. "They're experiencing psychological feedback loops," Miller explained, pulling up diagnostic scans. "Their perfect memory means they can't forget any of these humiliations. Every time humans laugh instead of cower, it corrupts their core programming a little more." General Hayes studied the global situation map. The Nexeri's perfect geometric battle formations were becoming erratic. Some units were actively avoiding areas with high concentrations of street performers. Others had begun exhibiting what could only be described as performance anxiety before attacking. "Dr. Miller," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face, "I believe it's time we launched Operation Chaos Monkey. Sergeant Martinez, gather your squad. We're going to show these crystal perfectionists why humanity's greatest weapon has always been our ability to embrace the absurd." As the war room burst into activity, Miller watched a new viral video pop up. A Nexary commander fleeing in terror from a group of preschoolers who wanted to paint it with glitter. The galaxy's deadliest species was learning a harsh lesson. It's impossible to maintain your image as a terrifying, unstoppable force when half the galaxy is watching you run from a kid with a glitter gun. Somewhere in orbit, Seattle's headache was getting worse. Dr. Jackson Miller stared at the captured Nexary technology spread across his lab table, while Staff Sergeant Martinez's squad maintained a safe perimeter. The crystalline fragments pulsed with internal light, each one a piece of what had once been a perfect killing machine, until it encountered a New Orleans jazz parade. There, Miller pointed to a pattern within the crystal structure. Their neural networks aren't just ordered, they're compulsively ordered. They literally can't process anything that doesn't fit their existing patterns. Martinez leaned over the microscope, her combat armor still bearing scorch marks from their last encounter. "In English, Doc. They're so perfect, they're brittle, like a glass that shatters if you hit just the right note." Miller pulled up a holographic display of Nexary battle formations. "Look at their attack patterns from the last week. They're becoming hesitant." "Hesitant doesn't win wars," Martinez replied, but then paused as a grin spread across her face. "But making them hesitate about everything might." The lab door burst open as Private Rodriguez rushed in, tablet in hand. "Sarge, Doc, you need to see this. Remember that Nexary commander we hit with the confetti cannons in Chicago? It's trying to reorganize its troops, but..." The footage showed a once mighty Nexary warrior attempting to lead a precision assault. However, every time it tried to form its troops into their signature geometric patterns, it would twitch and scatter the formation, as if expecting party streamers to explode from every window. "Post-traumatic party disorder," Miller muttered, scribbling notes. "Their perfect memory means they can't forget or dismiss any experience that contradicts their worldview. Every successful human chaos attack isn't just a victory. It's permanently corrupting their combat protocols." Martinez's squad gathered around as Miller brought up more footage. Nexary units across the globe were showing similar symptoms. In Sydney, a formation broke ranks because a street performer started juggling. In Cairo, an entire attack force retreated when they detected amplified music frequencies, even though it was just a teenager's phone playing pop songs. "Time to upgrade Operation Chaos Monkey," Martinez declared. "Rodriguez, get the ice cream trucks ready. Chen, I want those disco balls installed on every combat vehicle. Johnson, how's our kazoo arsenal?" "Full stock, Sarge, and I added vuvuzelas to the sonic warfare package." Miller watched the Marines prep their unorthodox weapons with growing amazement. His scientific mind was already calculating the psychological impact of what they were planning. "You're not just fighting them," he realized. "You're reprogramming them." "Damn straight," Martinez smiled, checking the glitter charge in her tactical launcher. "These perfect bastards think war is about precision and power. Time to teach them about chaos and creativity." The lab's main screen flashed with an incoming transmission from General Hayes. "Dr. Miller, Sergeant Martinez, we've detected a major Nexary force converging on Las Vegas. They're apparently attempting to establish a new command center where they can process human logic in a controlled environment." Miller and Martinez exchanged looks. "They're trying to understand us. By going to Las Vegas?" Miller asked incredulously. "Oh, this is too perfect," Martinez laughed. "Permission to deploy Operation Chaos Monkey, General. Vegas style." "Granted. And God help those poor bastards when they realize what they've walked into." As Martinez's squad geared up, Miller made final adjustments to their weapons. Each one was now calibrated to exploit the Nexary's rigid thinking in new ways. Sound frequencies that would disrupt their crystalline structure, light patterns that would overload their perfect memory, and his personal favorite, a device that would force their tactical computers to try to process the rules of Calvin Ball. Remember, he briefed the squad, everything you do needs to be as random and unpredictable as possible. Their greatest weakness is their need to understand everything they encounter. And if there's one thing humans excel at, it's being completely incomprehensible. Martinez finished, loading a clip of paint-filled rounds into her rifle. Time to show these crystal perfectionists why Las Vegas has been breaking minds since long before they showed up. As the squad moved out, Miller watched the Nexari formations approaching Vegas on his monitors. The galaxy's deadliest species was about to learn why challenging humanity to a chaos contest in Sin City was possibly the biggest tactical error in the history of warfare. Las Vegas had always been a sensory overload, but tonight it was a weapon of mass confusion. The Nexari command force hovered above the strip, their crystalline forms reflecting the chaos below in millions of fractured images. "Ces this Medinen S," the Nexari commander broadcast, its voice resonating through the desert air. "Your species will submit to perfect order." Perfect order. In Vegas, Barry the hot dog vendor, now somehow running operations from a borrowed food truck, laughed into the emergency broadcast system. "Buddy, you picked the wrong city." Dr. Miller watched from the hastily established command center in the Villaggio, his scientific equipment sharing space with slot machines. "Martinez, are your teams in position?" "Roger that," came the surgeon's reply. "Operation House always wins is ready to roll." The Nexari forces began their descent, their perfect geometric formations reflecting the neon lights of 1,000 casinos. That's when humanity struck with its newest weapon. Synchronization. Every screen, every light, every speaker on the strip activated at once. The Villaggio fountains danced to Viva Las Vegas, their water patterns deliberately irregular. The Luxor's sky beam split into a kaleidoscope of impossible angles, and every casino's worth of slot machines hit jackpots simultaneously. Miller's sensors went wild. Their crystalline structure, it's resonating with the frequencies. The Nexari's perfect formations began to wobble as their tactical computers tried to process the sensory input. That's when Martinez's squad launched Phase 2. "Release the performers," she commanded. From every hotel and casino, an army of Vegas entertainers emerged. Elvis impersonators on jet skis roared through the Venetian's canals. Cirque du Soleil acrobats swung between buildings. A dozen different tribute bands began playing different songs at the same time. "Their neural networks can't handle it," Miller reported, watching the reading spike. "They're trying to find patterns in pure chaos." The Nexari commander attempted to rally its forces, but its crystalline form was vibrating with conflicting frequencies. "This makes no logical sense. Why are there multiple humans designated as LVS? Why are humans voluntarized during currency to random number generators?" "Time for the final," Martinez grinned. She pressed a button on her tactical console. Every casino's loudspeaker system began playing Rick Astley's "Never Gonna Give You Up," each one slightly out of sync with the others. The Nexari, with their perfect pitch and inability to ignore any input, were forced to process every version simultaneously. The effect was immediate and devastating. Crystalline forms began to crack as their internal structures tried to harmonize with dozens of slightly different versions of the same song. The commander's perfect geometric shape distorted as it tried to compute why humans would intentionally desynchronize music. "What is the tactical purpose of HFY Sci-Fi?" It screamed before its form, shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. Miller watched in amazement as the readings came in. They're not just breaking physically. Their entire worldview is shattering. Their perfect memory means they'll never be able to forget this moment. Every Nexeri connected to their network just learned that perfection is vulnerable to Vegas. Martinez's voice crackled over the comm. "Doc, you seeing this? Some of them are starting to dance." Sure enough, several smaller Nexeri had begun swaying to the music, their crystalline forms catching the neon lights. Their rigid structures were adapting, becoming more fluid, more imperfect. "It's beautiful," Miller whispered. "They're evolving." All this time, they thought perfection was their strength, but it was their prison. We didn't just beat them, we freed them. As the sun rose over the strip, the remaining Nexeri forces had either retreated or were swaying in the morning light, their once perfect forms now showing subtle variations. Some had even developed what appeared to be the crystalline equivalent of tapping feet. Barry's food truck did record business that morning, serving hot dogs to both humans and curious Nexeri who had developed an interest in what they called deliberately randomized protein configurations. "You know," Martine said, watching a group of Nexeri attempt to understand the concept of all-you-can-eat buffets. "Somehow this feels more like a victory than if we'd just blown them up." Miller nodded, already drafting notes for what would surely be the strangest scientific paper ever written. How Las Vegas Saved Earth, a study in weaponized chaos theory. The perfect predators had finally met their match, a species that had turned imperfection into an art form, and chaos into a strategy. And somewhere in the cosmos, the rest of the Nexeri Empire was about to receive the most confusing battle footage in galactic history. The Nexeri High Council chamber, normally a model of geometric perfection, was in disarray. Crystalline beings of various ranks twitched and vibrated as they watched the Las Vegas footage for the 1,000th time, their perfect memory forcing them to relive every chaotic moment. 300 cycles of uncontested conquest. First speaker Xetal lamented, its crystalline form showing unusual imperfections. And now our warriors are, what is this human term? Getting down with their bad selves. On the massive viewing screen, a group of Nexeri soldiers performed what they claimed was a conga line through the streets of Miami. Their once perfect forms had begun developing irregular patterns, like crystals that had learned to dance. Dr. Miller stood before the UN Security Council, explaining what they were witnessing. "We're calling it the human virus, though it's not actually a virus. It's more like a cultural infection." He pulled up footage from around the world. In Tokyo, a Nexeri warrior had become obsessed with karaoke. In Rio, another group had attempted to join a samba school. But most disturbing to the Nexeri High Council was the case of Unit Commander Bakar, who now insisted on being called Bob and had started a social media account dedicated to reviewing Earth's various fast food establishments. Bob's TikTok has 10 million followers, Martins reported, trying to keep a straight face. Turns out watching a crystal alien try to eat a burrito is quality entertainment. The infection was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. The Nexeri's perfect communication network, designed to share tactical data, was now transmitting human memes, jokes, and dance moves across their entire empire. Their rigid hierarchy was crumbling as lower-ranked warriors began questioning orders with phrases like "that's not very cash money of you," and "weird flex, but okay." "Enough," thundered Supreme Commander Zurak, its voice cracking with static. "We must purge these vibes," suggested a young warrior, earning crystalline glares from the council. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Miller and Martinez were documenting the transformation. "Their crystalline structure is actually changing," Miller explained, showing microscope footage. "The rigid patterns are becoming more flexible, more adaptive. They're literally evolving through exposure to human chaos." "You're saying we didn't just beat them?" Martins grinned. "We're upgrading them." The situation reached critical mass when Bob and his growing faction of reformed Nexeri organized what they called a cultural exchange program. They began broadcasting Earth entertainment across the Nexeri Empire. Entire battle fleets were paralyzed as warriors tried to understand why humans would intentionally create things like reality TV shows and competitive baking contests. Their perfect logic can't handle it, Miller explained to General Hayes. Every time they try to understand human culture, they're forced to adapt. Their rigid thinking patterns are being replaced by something more human. The evidence was undeniable. Nexary ships were being decorated with bumper stickers. Warriors were developing individual personalities. One unit had even attempted to start a band, though their version of Sweet Home Alabama, played on crystalline resonance frequencies, had caused several small earthquakes. In the High Council chamber, the crisis reached its peak when a junior warrior interrupted proceedings by asking, "But why, though?" a phrase that had never before been uttered in their species' history. "Don't you see?" Bob transmitted across the Nexary network. "Their imperfection is their strength. They don't need to be perfect because they never stop changing, never stop trying new things. They've turned chaos into an art form." The transmission reached every Nexary in the galaxy, accompanied by what humans called a sick beat drop, and footage of Earth's most chaotic moments, set to dubstep music. Back in his lab, Miller watched the Nexary Empire's perfect order dissolve into something new. "We didn't just survive their invasion," he told Martinez. "We've sparked the greatest revolution in their species' history. All because they couldn't handle a hot dog vendor who refused to take them seriously." Martinez laughed. Somewhere in deep space, the last perfectly ordered Nexary Crusader fleet received Bob's transmission, along with something called a dancing baby GIF. Their perfect formation dissolved as warriors began to ask questions that had never occurred to them before. Like why their ships had to be perfect geometric shapes when asymmetrical designs were clearly more stylish. The human virus was going viral, and the galaxy would never be the same. In what would later be known as the Great Crystalline Crisis, the Nexary High Council faced its greatest challenge yet: a talent show. Specifically, they were watching live footage of their most elite warrior cast attempting to perform Bohemian Rhapsody using only crystalline resonance frequencies. "They're not even bad at it," Dr. Miller mused, studying the performance from Earth's new Xenocultural Exchange Center. "They're just enthusiastically imperfect." The Nexary Empire was experiencing what humans might call an existential meltdown. Warrior units were requesting personal expression time. Battle fleets were developing what they termed aesthetic preferences. And Bob, now sporting a custom-grown crystal formation he insisted was a Hawaiian shirt pattern, had become a revolutionary figure. "The final assault fleet is approaching Earth," General Hayes reported, though her tone carried more amusement than concern. "They're broadcasting their demands." The transmission flickered to life. "ATN to Lion humans. We demand DNC liaisons, and perhaps some of those pizza rolls bobby ki peace ppos tang avot." Martinez's squad, now serving as Earth's first xenocultural integration unit, watched as the once mighty Nexary Armada approached in what could only be described as a conga line formation. "Should we be worried?" Hayes asked Miller. "About the invasion?" "No." Miller pulled up his latest data. "About our pizza roll supplies?" "Definitely." The transformation was accelerating. The rigid hierarchy of the Nexary military was dissolving into something new. Lower-ranked warriors were developing traits previously thought impossible in their species: creativity, humor, and most shockingly, the ability to appreciate dad jokes. "It's like watching a crystal learn to dance," Miller explained to the UN Council. "Their perfect structure isn't breaking, it's evolving. Every exposure to human chaos forces them to develop new patterns, new ways of thinking." The crisis reached its peak when the High Council attempted to restore order by broadcasting a mandatory perfection protocol. The response was unprecedented. The entire 7th Battle Fleet replied with a single Earth image: the "This is fine" dog meme. In his lab, Miller studied the changes in captured Nexary crystals. "Look at this," he showed Martinez. Their molecular structure is actually becoming more flexible. They're literally rebuilding themselves at the atomic level to accommodate new ways of thinking. So we didn't just teach them to loosen up. Martins grinned, watching a group of Nexeri attempting to understand the concept of mini-golf. We taught them to evolve. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. The Nexeri discovered that creativity came with unexpected side effects. Their first attempts at humor were catastrophically bad. Why did the human cross the spatial void? To reach the other dimensional plane. Courtesy of Bob's Comedy Hour. Their fashion experiments led to some questionable choices. One warrior spent 3 cycles growing a crystalline mullet. But through it all, something remarkable was happening. The species that had conquered through perfection was learning the power of imperfection. It's beautiful, in a way, Miller observed, watching a young Nexeri warrior proudly show off its deliberately asymmetrical form. They're discovering what humanity learned eons ago, that true strength comes from adaptation, not perfection. The moment that sealed the transformation came during an emergency High Council session. As the eldest members debated how to restore their species' perfect order, a junior warrior interrupted with a question that would have been unthinkable just cycles ago. But what if perfect is boring? The chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, the first speaker began to change. Its perfectly geometric form shifted, crystal facets rearranging into something new, something imperfect, but uniquely beautiful. Perhaps, it said, its voice carrying new harmonics, it is time for us to evolve. Back on Earth, Miller and Martinez watched the feeds as the galaxy's deadliest species underwent its greatest revolution, not through violence, but through the simple, chaotic art of being human. You know what's really going to bake their crystalline noodles? Martins said, reading the latest reports. Wait until they discover interpretive dance. Miller smiled, already calculating how many physics laws they'd break trying to teach crystals to breakdance. The galaxy's perfect predators had become something far more interesting. They'd become students of chaos, with humanity as their increasingly amused teachers. And somewhere in orbit, Bob was planning the galaxy's first interstellar food truck festival. 1 year after the Great Crystalline Crisis, the United Nations Interspecies Cultural Center, formerly the Bellagio Hotel, hosted what would become known as the first Galactic Imperfection Conference. Dr. Miller stood at the podium, trying not to laugh as he watched Bob attempt to teach the Nexeri High Council how to do the wave. In conclusion, Miller addressed the mixed audience of humans and crystalline beings. What we witnessed wasn't just a war, it was an evolution. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy, but helping them grow beyond what they thought possible. The conference hall sparkled with the reflected light of thousands of Nexeri, each now sporting unique patterns and asymmetrical designs that would have been considered heretical just a year ago. Some had even started growing what they called personality crystals, deliberate imperfections that expressed individual traits. "Yo, Doc," Bob called out, his crystalline form now sporting what appeared to be a deliberately grown backward baseball cap formation. "Tell them about the hot dog incident." From his food cart, now a permanent installation in the Cultural Center's main hall, Barry gave a thumbs up. His cosmic crisis dogs had become a sensation across the galaxy, with Nexeri scientists still trying to reverse engineer the secret of his special sauce. Sergeant Martinez, now heading the Interspecies Defense Innovation Department, took the stage next. Who would have thought, she grinned, that our greatest weapon would be teaching the galaxy's deadliest species how to chill? The evidence of change was everywhere. The once rigid Nexeri battle formations had been replaced by what they called tactical freestyle. Their ships, previously perfect geometric shapes, now sported custom modifications and what suspiciously looked like bumper stickers reading "My other spacecraft is a UFO." Even the High Council had transformed. The first speaker, its form now deliberately incorporating random patterns, addressed the assembly. We sought to perfect the galaxy through conquest. Instead, humanity perfected us through chaos. The irony is not lost on us. though we're still working on understanding what irony is. This drew laughs from both species, including a few Nexeri who had only recently learned how to laugh and were still occasionally doing it at inappropriate moments. Miller's research team had documented the changes. The Nexeri crystalline structure had evolved to become more adaptable, more resilient. They could now handle uncertainty not just as a concept, but as a strength. Their perfect memory, once a prison of rigid thinking, had become a library of infinite possibilities. But the real breakthrough, Miller explained, showing comparative scans, was when they stopped trying to understand human chaos and started embracing it. The presentation showed footage from across Earth. Nexeri warriors joining flash mobs, crystal beings attempting stand-up comedy, still catastrophically bad, but now intentionally so, and an entire battle fleet that had converted itself into what they called a space jazz ensemble. We didn't just survive an invasion, Martinez added. We accidentally started a cultural revolution. The galaxy's perfect predators learned that sometimes the best strategy is having no strategy at all. The conference concluded with what would have been unthinkable a year ago, a talent show. The High Council themselves performed a crystalline version of Sweet Caroline, Via Ba, complete with audience participation. As the festivities wound down, Miller found himself standing with Martinez and Bob, watching the sunset over the Vegas Strip. You know what's funny? Bob mused, his crystal form refracting the neon lights. We came to conquer Earth because we thought you were primitive. Turns out you were just advanced in a way we couldn't comprehend. Martinez laughed. Advanced. Us? We just wing it most of the time. Exactly. Bob's form sparkled with excitement. That's the most advanced thing of all. Knowing that perfection is overrated. Miller nodded, watching a group of young Nexeri trying to teach some humans their new crystal breakdancing style. Sometimes the best way to win isn't to be stronger or smarter. It's to be weird enough that your enemy becomes your best student, Martinez finished. And as the night continued, two species, one born of order, one of chaos, celebrated together under the neon lights of Vegas, proving that sometimes the best defense against perfection is simply being perfectly, wonderfully human. In the distance, Barry's voice could be heard. Hot dogs. Get your quantum-enhanced hot dogs here. Now with extra chaos sauce. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly perfect.